All right, we're in 2 Chronicles chapter 10, if you want to find your place there. 2 Chronicles chapter 10. While you're finding your place there, I'll tell you, every time we sing that song, He is Jehovah, I always think of the time that we took my mom and dad to the Passion Play in not Eureka Springs, it was Glen Rose, Texas. The Promise, and they did that song. And the boys were little. It had to be, 15 years ago or something. It was a long time ago. My dad was still alive. He's been dead for 8. So, long time ago. Anyway, but my mama my mama was like always old. Like she was 32 when I was born, but she was old. And always old. And so in the Passion Play, they did this song, and there's a line in there that talks about Jehovah Jireh, my provider, whatever, however the song goes. And so where this play's over, we're coming back to the car, and I said, asking my mom and dad, how'd you like it? My dad's like, oh, it was great, I loved it, My mom's like, well, I liked it, but I just don't really like the way they had Jesus portrayed. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm just not really into that whole contemporary thing. Like, what are you talking about? Because I thought, because they had Jesus and the disciples out kind of dancing around, and I thought that's what she meant. She said, well, I just don't like them making Jesus a Jehovah Jireh. As he says, I just don't think that's what, I know that that's the way the world is going, but I just don't like thinking of Jesus as a Jehovah Jireh. And I'm like, hey, you can dress them up, but you can't take them out, I think. So. Anyway, so I always think, every time we sing that song, I think of that time. I think that's the last time we took him to the Passion Play. That's what, if I remember right. All right, we're in 2 Chronicles chapter 10. So we've been doing the life of Solomon for several weeks now. And really, I kind of wrapped that up last week. And this sermon is not really part of that series because by the time this takes place, Solomon is already dead. But I think it fits well, having just studied and preached about Solomon, to see that some of the mistakes that Solomon made in walking away from God. You remember last week we looked at where Solomon loved many foreign wives and they turned his heart away from God. And because of that, God was going to punish Solomon and his dynasty by ripping the kingdom from him. He was going to leave the southern kingdom, just 2 tribes would be left in under the dynasty of David's dynasty. For David's sake, he's not going to tear Judah away, and Benjamin was kind of coupled with the tribe of Judah. But the 10 northern tribes were going to break away and be given to another. In part of what we didn't read, we find that the one that the prophets say is going to get the other 10 tribes of the kingdom is a man named Jeroboam. And Jeroboam was in charge of Solomon's forced labor. So he was the one that was going to inherit the kingdom. Now, this sort of made friction between Solomon and Jeroboam, as you can imagine. And so Jeroboam flees to Egypt to basically wait out the wrath of Solomon. So this story that we're going to look at, it involves King Solomon's son, Rehoboam, who inherits the kingdom after Solomon dies. And Rehoboam is Solomon's son. He's heir to the throne. And he goes to Shechem to be a part of this formal ceremony where all of Israel is going to declare him king, all 12 tribes. And all of the tribes are there. And Rehoboam has big shoes to fill because Solomon was probably the greatest king. He and his father David, probably the 2 best kings that Israel had maybe ever had, but certainly up to that point. it was the glory days of Israel. I mean, times were good, money was good, people were prosperous. It was a time of relative peace. So things had been good. Solomon had been a good king. He had been a good leader. He had made some mistakes. And now Rehoboam goes up to Shechem to fill his father's shoes and be coronated king, crowned king of all of Israel. Now, there's another character that's also going to be present in this exchange of events, and it is this Jeroboam. Jeroboam is, as I said, in charge of the forced labor. He was a people's man, and so the people liked him, especially the people of the northern tribes of Israel liked him. And in this exchange, the people ask for something. And the people basically say, your father was hard on us. Solomon was hard on us. Lighten our load, and we'll be your servant. We'll be happy to be your servant. Just lighten our load. Now, he's in a bit of a predicament, and so he doesn't really know how to answer. And so the answer he gives is, come back in 3 days. Now, let's take a look at these verses and see this story play out. I'm in verse 1 of 2 Chronicles chapter 10. And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone to Shechem to make him king. So it happened when Jeroboam the son of Nebat heard it, he was in Egypt, where he had fled from the presence of King Solomon, that Jeroboam returned from Egypt. Then they sent for him and called him. And Jeroboam and all Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the burdensome service of your father and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you. So he said to them, come back to me after 3 days, and the people departed. And King Rehoboam consulted the elders who stood before his father Solomon while he still lived, saying, how do you advise me to answer these people? And they spoke to him, saying, if you're kind to these people and please them and speak good words to them, they will be your servants forever. But he rejected the advice which the elders had given him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him, who stood before him. And he said to them, what advice do you give? How should we answer this people who have spoken to me, saying, lighten the yoke which your father put on us? Then the young men who had grown up with him spoke to him, saying, thus you should speak to the people who have spoken to you, saying, your father made our yoke heavy, but you make it lighter on us. Thus you shall say to them, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's waist. Now whereas my father put a heavy yoke on you, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the 3rd day, as the king had directed, saying, come back to me the 3rd day. Then the king answered them roughly. King Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders, and he spoke to them according to the advice of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. So the king did not listen to the people, for the turn of events was from God, that the Lord might fulfill his word, which he had spoken by the hand of Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. So when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, what share have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to your tents, O Israel. Now see to your own house, O David. So all Israel departed to their tents, but Rehoboam reigned over the children of Israel who dwelt in the cities of Judah. Then King Rehoboam sent Hadoram, who was in charge of revenue, but the children of Israel stoned him with stones, and he died. Therefore King Rehoboam mounted his chariot in haste to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. The kid who lost his kingdom. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we come to you again tonight, Lord. I'm asking you to speak to us through your word. I'm asking you, Lord, to give me what I'm supposed to say and the power to say it tonight, Lord. I pray, God, that you would fill me with your Holy Spirit. And I pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen. The kid who lost his kingdom. So when I was a kid, my parents had a old set of dominoes that sometimes I could get down and they'd let me play with them. And I used to set them up all in a row. But you had to be very careful, because if you bumped one, then if you had them set just right, then the first domino would fall, and then every domino would fall after that until the whole set of dominoes was just a big mess in the floor. It was great fun. I love playing that. I look at some people's lives, and they look to me like that set of dominoes. That like their life is set in such a way that it takes one straw to break the camel's back, so to speak. And here, Israel was ripe for failure. And Rehoboam was ripe for failure. Now, it's interesting the way you look at this, because in some ways you can look at it and say, well, it was Solomon's fault because he was the one that turned away from the Lord. His foreign wives turned his heart away from the Lord, and as punishment, the kingdom was taken away from his ancestors. And that's true. And there's another way that you can look at it and say, well, Rehoboam lost his kingdom because he was a real jerk to these people. I mean, he didn't demonstrate wisdom at all. And that's true. So, you ask the question, whose fault was it? Was it Solomon's fault, or was it Rehoboam's fault? And the answer is yes. It seems to be both, that they both shared culpability in the fall of this, at the time, probably the greatest kingdom in the world. I mean, I don't know that Israel could ever say that before or since, but in the days of David and Solomon, it would rival the greatest kingdoms in the world at that time. So I want us to look tonight at the failures on the part of Rehoboam, knowing that Solomon he failed, and this was his doing, but it's also a lot of foolishness on the part of Rehoboam. So that's kind of what I want to focus on tonight, is from the point of view of the things that Rehoboam did that caused him to lose his kingdom. So like those dominoes, sometimes mistakes in our life can line up to topple our life. So we're going to look at 3 mistakes that will topple your kingdom tonight. 3 mistakes that will topple your kingdom. The first is who you listen to. Who are you listening to? Now, he shows some wisdom by asking for 3 days. He could have been very impulsive and given an answer right away, but he doesn't know, and he knows enough to know that he doesn't know, and so he buys some time. Give me 3 days. One of the wisest things that you can say ever is, I don't know. The foolish thing to say is to make out like you know when you don't know. I just think it's amazing that this was Solomon's son, and Solomon was supposed to be the wisest man in the Old Testament. He grew up, so this boy grew up with a father that was the wisest man in the Old Testament. And yet none of it seemed to rub off on him. Because you look at this, and it's some of the most foolish things that you could see. He asked for 3 days. That was a good thing. And the people just want to know, basically their complaint is this. People go to Rehoboam and they say, look, your daddy was hard on us. And we're tired. And their main complaint seems to be this idea of forced labor. These were people from the northern tribes, and they were being conscripted to build building projects in and around Jerusalem. So, in other words, Solomon was using northern labor to build southern projects. And they just said, look, that just doesn't seem fair. That doesn't seem right. We're not saying we won't work for you. We're not saying we won't serve you. We're just tired. We just need a break. Can you just lighten our load just a little bit? And so Solomon says, Rehoboam says, give me 3 days, and then come back, and I'll give you an answer. So during that time, he starts seeking advice. Now, the first people that he seeks advice from are the elders, the old men, the people that stood by Solomon. Solomon's counsel, his advisors. Now, think about this. These men were advisors to the wisest man in the Bible, the wisest man of the Old Testament. How wise do you think they would have been? They stood before Solomon on a regular basis. They heard his wisdom. They saw his decisions. They asked him, what should we do? And the advice of the elders is found in chapter 10, verse 6. King Rehoboam consulted the elders who stood before his father Solomon while he was still alive, saying, how do you advise me to answer this people? They spoke to him, saying, if you're kind to these people and please them and speak good words to them, they'll be your servants forever. In other words, they said, look, if you be a friend to them, they'll be a friend to you. If you love them, they'll love you forever. I told when Parker was going to serve in this internship at Talala, he's going, what should I do? I said, you go in there and you love those people, and you love them, and I promise they'll love you. And they have. He has 30 grandmas and grandpas there, because he has treated them with love, and they've loved him back. That's what the elders are trying to tell Rehoboam here. Love them, be good to them, cut them a little bit of slack, and they'll serve you forever. He says, okay, thanks for your advice. Then he goes to the young men, his friends, his peers, the ones that he grew up with. And he asks, hey, I got this situation, and I got to give them back an answer in 3 days. And they want to know, these people want to know, if I'll lighten their load a little bit, what should I tell them? And the old people, Daddy's old friends, they said to go ahead and cut them some slack, and they'd serve me. But what do you say? Now, whatever wisdom Rehoboam had, it's just about to fly out the window when he starts seeking advice from his peers, because they don't have a clue as to what they're doing or what Rehoboam should do. And in verse 10, they say this: the young men who had grown up with him and spoke to him. And there's a clue right there. Everybody wants to run to their friends, run to their buddies. They may not necessarily be the wisest ones to run to. Sometimes a stranger can give you better advice than your friends. The young men, the ones that he grew up with, spoke to him, saying, thus you should speak to the people who have spoken to you, saying, your father made our yoke heavy, but you make it lighter on us. Some of the people I grew up with, there's no way in the world I'd want to take advice from them. Thus you shall say to them, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's waist. And my father put a heavy yoke on you, and I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. So we read that, we think that's kind of a goofy thing to say. What does all that mean? Well, apparently this is some sort of Hebrew idiom. This my little finger is thicker than my father's waist is some sort of way of saying, if you thought my daddy was a mean dude, you ain't seen nothing yet till you seen me. If you think it was bad under Dad, you just wait. I'm going to make your life miserable. He says, my dad chastised you with whips. Now, I don't know that Solomon did or didn't. I don't remember reading where Solomon had laborers whipped, although maybe if they weren't performing their duty, he did. But he says, you thought it was bad getting whipped? I'm going to discipline you with scourges. Literally, it's something like scorpions, and that's not scorpion like a bug, like I wouldn't want to be disciplined with those either, but the idea is more like a whip or a scourge that would have like barbs in it or sharp objects. In other words, you thought it was bad being whipped. I'm going to cut you to pieces, is basically what he's saying. And the young men, they tell him, you go tell these people that, and you show them who's boss. It is amazing to me how we are so good at seeking bad advice and not listening to good advice. I think of teenagers, and I think of back in the day when I was a teenager, and I did the same thing, and I'm sure my boys did the same thing too. It's part of being a teenager. If a teenager has a problem, they automatically run to their parents for advice, don't they? Who do they go to? They go to their friends. Hey, man, I got this problem, and da-da-da-da-da. And the friends always have something to say. It frustrated me, and I know I did the same thing to my dad, but it always frustrated me, and it's still this way. I mean, they haven't outgrown this part of it, but it would be like, they'll have this situation, and I'll tell them now, son, you need to do it this way. And now they're grown men, and that's probably why they resent it for me. But I've been in situations like that before, and I know, son, do it this way. Oh, that ain't gonna work. That's it's kind of this attitude of you don't know, you're just old and you don't know what you're talking about. They don't say that, but I mean that's kind of the implication. And then after the fact, it's kind of like, oh, Dad, you were right. I should have listened to you. And you would think that I would be glad to hear those words, Dad, you were right, I should have listened to you. But actually what's going through my mind is, well, knucklehead, if you'd have listened to me to start with, you wouldn't be in the mess that you're in right now. I don't say that either, and it keeps a little bit of a little bit of bliss in the house when I don't say those things. But why do we do that? And I got to say, I did the same thing. I don't ever remember going to my parents as a teenager saying, now what do you think I ought to do? So some people, say that it would be fun to go to this party Friday night, and and others, some people might think that that's not a good idea. But what do you think I ought to do? I don't ever remember asking advice of my parents like that. Why don't teenagers go to their parents for advice? Well, it's pride. I mean, really, let's just be honest. It's pride. I can do it on my own. I know as much as Dad does. It's pride. But parents do the same thing. I had a lady in the church. I don't know. I don't even remember which church, but it's been a while ago. But she come to me one day and she's telling me, she says, well, Brother Mark, I just want you to pray for us. I'm divorcing my husband. I said, why are you doing that? Well, he's just, it's just going to be impossible to live with, and he's getting worse, and I didn't even know they had any trouble. I said, well, you want to come in, we get, y'all in, and maybe get Lisa in, the four of us can sit down, and we can, talk through this, maybe do some counseling, maybe save your marriage. Nope, there's no time for that. It's already done. I said, well, don't you think you need some, marriage counseling or something? You want to try something? Oh, I've already got counseling. I'm already talking to somebody that's giving me advice and counseling. I said, oh, are you seeing another pastor? Are you seeing a marriage and family counselor, or what are you? No, it's the lady I work with, and she's been divorced 5 times, and she knows all about it. Ain't nobody knows nothing about bad husbands like she does. And she told me that there ain't no hope, and my marriage is down the drain, and the best thing I can do is just divorce him. So I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I'm like, really? This is your good advice. Why do we do that? Pride. Why? What was wrong with Rehoboam? That he didn't listen to the old men. That was his dad's friend. he had to listen to the young men. That was his friends' pride. And they play into that. Do you notice that? The old men preach humility. Swallow your pride just a little bit, Rehoboam. You be good to these people. You tell them, hey, you know, I'm going to love you. I'm going to try to work with you. You work with me, I'll work with you. They said, if you'll do that, they'll love you and work and serve you forever. But what do the young men say? Oh, you can't bow down to them like that. You tell them, if you think my daddy was mean, you ain't seen nothing yet. You just stand back and wait till you see me. And so Rehoboam gets into a predicament where he's not listening to good advice, but he is listening to bad advice. And I think it's because the good advice wasn't what he wanted to hear. He didn't want to hear, love them, be good to them, be a little bit humble. He wanted to hear advice that puffed up that ego that was already inflated. I'm the king. I'm the boss. I can do it my way. That's what he wanted to hear. When I was about 35, I fell off of a ladder, and I shattered the cartilage in my knee. I didn't know I'd done that at the time. I just knew my knee hurt and swelled up about the size of a basketball. And everybody at church told me, oh, you need to go to the doctor, go to the doctor, go to the doctor. You know what it means when you tell a man to go to the doctor? Nothing. I mean, I'm like, all right, I'll be all right. I said, I'll just take care of it, so I'll just pop a handful of Advil every day, and it'll get better in about 6 months. So after about a couple of months, it really got to hurting pretty bad. So I went to the doctor. Doctor x-rayed it and all this, and he says, well, I'm just go to like just a regular general practitioner guy, family doctor. He goes, well, he said, I want to refer you to an orthopedic surgeon. I'm like, I know that word surgeon. See, I'm 35. I've never had surgery. And I'm thinking, it's probably going to hurt, and then I'm going to get a bill, and that's going to hurt even worse. And I think, I don't know. I said, I could tell. I think he could tell that wasn't what I want to hear. He said, well, you can keep taking Advil every day and see if it gets better. I said, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. So I did. For about 6 months, every morning I'd take a handful of Advil. And it never really got better. And it got to the point where it would lock up. Like I'd be walking along, and all of a sudden my knee would just seize up, and I'd just fall out in the middle of the floor. The people were looking around. I'm just crawling around on the floor. Well, what happened? Well, my knee seized up. I didn't know it at the time, but there was little bits of cartilage floating around in there that would get lodged in that knee joint and literally just like lock my knee up. So finally, after about 6 months, I told Lisa, I said, I'm going to have to do something. This just ain't working. So I made me an appointment with this orthopedic surgeon and go see him, and he looks at the x-ray, and he comes in. First thing he said, he looks at me. He never met me before. He comes in and looks at me and says, well, you're tough. I'll say that for you. he said, asked me what happened and everything. He said, well, why didn't you go to the doctor? I said, I went to the doctor not long after it happened. He said, what did he tell you to do? He said, come see an orthopedic surgeon. And he looked at me and he shook his head. He said, well, you should have listened to him. He said, if you'd have come in 6 months ago, I could have repaired your knee and made it normal again. But you have literally, because you've walked on it for 6 months, you've literally ground that cartilage to powder in there. There's nothing left to repair. So they actually had to go in and clean all that mess out and then take plugs out of of cartilage out of the side of my knee and graft them into the front of my knee just so I could walk. I'm sitting there on the table right before they knocked me out to do the surgery. I said, so Doc, am I going to be able to play church league softball and pick up basketball again and all that? He looked at me kind of funny. He said, man, I'm just trying to get you to where you don't walk with a limp. I'm like, okay, doc, whatever you need to do. But I thought, man, I didn't listen to good advice when I should have. And I didn't listen to it because it wasn't what I wanted to hear. I wanted somebody to tell me, hey, if you can just take enough Advil and bear out the pain, it'll get better after a while. And because I didn't listen to good advice, instead of getting better, it ended up getting worse. There's a whole lot of things in life like that. We hear good advice and we ignore good advice because it's not what we want to hear. And we end up with a life that's 10 times worse because we think that we know better than God on it. You need to find you someone who can give you trustworthy, godly advice. And that's probably not, someone who's not in church and not serving the Lord. Find you somebody that knows the Bible and knows the Lord, that you can say, hey, this is going on in my life. What do you think I ought to do? And hear that. Who are you listening to? Rehoboam was listening to bad advice, and it cost him his kingdom. Secondly, who do you work for? We ask ourselves this question: who do you work for? And really, I mean, there's three options there. You're working for God, you're working for other people, or you're working for yourself. And that's really the only three options that you've got there. And the only good answer really is God. Because everything we do is supposed to be for His glory. Rehoboam confused authority with respect. And I think sometimes we do that, especially if we haven't been the boss before or haven't been it very long. He confused authority, which he had, with respect, which has to be earned. I've always said that anybody that will say, I want to be the boss, is somebody that's never been the boss. Because if you've ever been the boss and you've really had to be in charge of people, it's a whole lot more fun to be a follower than it is to be the boss man. And being a leader and being a boss are two different things as well, and Rehoboam doesn't seem to understand that. The elders that he talks to at first seem to realize that you never get too high and mighty for the golden rule. In other words, basically their advice is, Rehoboam, if you will treat these people like you would want to be treated, then they'll do the same for you. They'll return the favor. As I said, the main grievance they seemed to have was this conscripted labor was from the north, and all the building projects were in the south. And if you read this story, it seems like, just from reading it, it seems like most folks, they just wanted somebody to listen to them. What I've found, a lot of times when people are upset or disgruntled, and this is true in church as well, it's not always the case. Some people they get a burr under their saddle and they're just not going to be happy. I mean, it's just the way I guess they're wired or something. But then there's a whole other group of people that if they have a grievance of some sort, they just want to be able to sit down and talk to somebody about it and really believe that this person that I'm talking to understands and cares. Whether they can fix the problem or not, at least they know and care that I have a problem, and they understand that. That seems like to be what these people want. They're like, hey, and they didn't come to rebel. They came to Shechem to make him the king. That was their idea. They said, well, by the way, we're happy to make you king. We just want to ask you one thing. Can you lighten our load just a little bit? Make life just a little bit easier on us. And he comes out with this goofy little idiom when they come back, after they return after 3 days, and he basically gives them this my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. In other words, you haven't seen nothing yet. You thought my father was bad. You seen nothing yet. Wait till you see me. And I'll chastise you with scourges. I'll chastise you with scorpions if you thought my daddy was bad. You can tell how big of a man somebody is by how much they have to prove it, by how badly they need to prove it. My dad used to say that you can always tell those people who really amount to something from those that are just pretending to amount to something by how big a deal they have to make over themselves. And I've kind of watched in life, and that seems to be the case. But I think you can also say it's true that you can tell how big of a man somebody is by how badly they need to prove it. The people that really amount to something. The men that are really men that we would really look up to and say, I want to be like him. I want my sons to grow up and be like this man. They don't have to go around proving it. It's the ones that always have a chip on their shoulder that they have to prove what a big deal they are that really don't amount to anything. Have you ever worked for a young boss? Some of you may have, some of you may not. I've had a couple of jobs in school and whatever where I worked for a teenager. I'm not trying to offend any teenagers, but I'm going to tell you, as a general rule, and maybe there are some great teenage bosses out there. I'm telling you, as a general rule, your worst nightmare is to have a teenager for a boss. Because they really don't know what they're doing, but they have to try to act like they do. And they're unsure of themselves, and so they're going to go overboard. And they're the people, they're the bosses that are going to make you, scrub the floors with a toothbrush and, work, overtime because, something, was out of kilter or whatever. They're never going to do anything helpful or nice. If you ask them for any kind of favor at all, they're not. Now, you can work for an old person, and they're a great boss. Most of the time. Not always, but most of the time they are. Why? Because they don't have anything to prove. I think here we have a young man in Rehoboam who's in over his head, and he doesn't know how to handle the situation. Now, he's got people giving him good advice, but he's got too much pride to listen to that good advice. And so instead, he goes and asks the advice of some people that don't know any more about it than he does. And comes back, and their advice is this: if you're going to be the king, you've got to prove it. You've got to show them what a big man you are. And so he goes out to do that, and the kingdom just starts unraveling at that point. Our final question we have to ask ourselves is this: who are you trusting in? Who are you trusting in? It says as a result of this, he gives them their word. Well, you think that Solomon was bad, I'm going to be twice as bad. And they're just kind of in shock at this point because I think they really thought that he would listen to them, and I think they really thought that they were going to get somewhere and be able to hold the kingdom together. But instead, at this, they say, "To your tents, O Israel." What does Israel have to do with the house of David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. In other words, take care of yourself in your own tribe, which is what it ends up splitting out as. We'll go do our own thing. And so the 10 northern tribes confederate and become the northern kingdom of Israel, and they appoint Jeroboam, their king, and Rehoboam, he has the southern kingdom of Judah, which also included Benjamin, but Benjamin really wasn't a very large tribe, so it's mainly Judah. And the kingdom that David and Solomon worked so hard for is now torn asunder. I think the great lesson of this story is how much easier it is to break something than it is to fix it once it's broken. One bad decision on Rehoboam's part destroyed what had taken David and Solomon 80 years to build. Now you could say it the same way with Solomon. The bad decision of him letting his heart follow after other gods because his wives led his heart astray towards these foreign gods, it cost him the kingdom as well that David had worked so hard to build, and the kingdom that his son was going to inherit. Now, at this point, Rehoboam does an even more foolish thing. Because the deed is done, the kingdom is split, but he tries to fix it himself. And even in chapter 11, a prophet of God says that this is of God. You can't fix it. You can't fix it, Rehoboam. It's broken. God is the one that has done this, and you can't fix it. But he tries to fix it. And so he sends messengers to these breakaway tribes to try to get them back in the fold. And they stone the messenger. Verse 17, Rehoboam reigned over the children of Israel who dwelt in cities of Judah. Then King Rehoboam sent Hadaram, who was in charge of revenue, but the children of Israel stoned him with stones, and he died. This is going from bad to worse. Now we not only got the kingdom being destroyed, we've got people dying all over these bad decisions that Rehoboam has made. Then he mounts his chariot and goes to Jerusalem, presumably to prepare for war, because he's trying to fix what God is doing. Pride wouldn't let him trust God to fix it. So he tried to fix it himself. And that's so often our case. We get our life in such a mess, and the solution is to hand it to God and say, God, I messed up. Fix this mess that I made of things. But pride won't let us do that. When I was a kid, they had a really neat toy, and it was a little, that they later started making them out of plastic, but the first ones were made out of metal, and it was a little spring about that big around. It walked down the stairs alone or in pairs. It was a spring, a marvelous thing. And everybody knows it was a slinky, right? Y'all grew up with slinkies? No? Yeah, okay. Anyway, but it was this little toy, and it was this little metal spring. And they were notorious for getting tangled up. Now, I had one advantage as a kid. My dad was an expert slinky untangler. So anytime I got my slinky tangled up, I could take it to him and say, Dad, I've got it. And he would very patiently, one of the few times he was ever patient, but he would sit there and he would fiddle with that slinky till he got it all undone and put back right. That worked really good until I had a friend over one day, and he got to playing with that slinky, and he got it tangled up. And I said, I didn't worry about it. I said, that's all right. My dad can fix it. Let me see it. I'll take it out. No. I think he thought that he would get in trouble for breaking my slinky. You know, I can fix it. And he turned around and he starts fiddling with it. And I'm like, let me see it, and my dad can fix it. No, I don't need no help. I can do it. I know how to do these right here. And he's fiddling with it. I'm like, please just let me have it. I can do it. And finally he spins back around and he says, well, okay, let your dad fix it. And it's just a wad of just metal, just mangled up like this. And I take it into my dad, and I'm like, here's the slinky. Can you fix it? He's like, I don't know if I can fix that. And he kept working with it till he finally got it unwound. But the kid had bent it in such a way that it was warped, and it would never do right again. It would never work right again. It was untangled, the mess was straightened out, but the effects were never put back right. And I've often thought that I think that's the way we do life sometimes. You know, we get our life in a mess. And the one that can straighten it out is our Heavenly Father. But instead of taking our life before the Lord and saying, God, I messed up. Can you fix this? And letting Him fix our life. Pride causes us to think we can do it ourselves. So when God says, let me have your life, I'll get it straightened out, we turn away and no, God, I can do it myself. I don't need any help. I can do this. I can fix this. Let me work on getting my life straightened out. And God, as soon as I get things straightened out, then I'll be back in church and then I'll be back serving you again. Boy, turn back to me, son. Turn back to me. You can't fix it. This is something only I can do. No, God, I can do it. Until finally our life is in such a big mess that all that we can do is hand this big mess that was once our life to God and say, God, I can't do it. Can you fix it? Now, here's the thing. God can fix it. God can fix it, and God will fix it. And God can fix it in a way that it's not warped anymore. But sometimes, and this is the hard truth that you need to hear, sometimes the consequences of what we've done don't go away just with an I'm sorry. Now, God will forgive you, but sometimes we do things in our life that have consequences, like that slinky that's perpetually broken because it can't really be put back like it once was. You start listening to bad advice. You start turning away from the God who can fix things. You let pride run its course in your life. And you'll end up with things in your life that an I'm sorry won't fix. Not saying God won't forgive you, but there will be consequences to pay, a price to pay. And Rehoboam here had a price to pay. The main problem with Rehoboam, pride. Let's sum it up in one word, pride. What's the main thing that keeps people from Jesus? Pride. Same thing. What's the main thing that will destroy your life? Pride. Not turning it over to Jesus. Who are you listening to tonight? Who are you working for? And who are you trusting in? Let's pray. God, we do thank you for your word. Thank you for this story. Thank you for how you speak to us, God. Lord, as we come to this time of invitation, Lord, would you touch our hearts? God, would you lead us to the decisions that you'd have us to make tonight? We pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.